Good evening. Tonight, we're talking about required inputs. Not motivation, not inspiration, not vibes. Inputs. Because a day requires certain things from a man. The body has to be moved. The mind has to be directed. The mouth has to be governed. The appetite has to be questioned. The work has to be touched. And the truth has to be told. That's the arrangement. Not because the universe is cruel, you see. Not because life is trying to humiliate you, but because every life is built out of inputs. What you feed grows. What you neglect weakens. What you repeat becomes familiar. And what becomes familiar starts to feel like identity. The standard does not ask what you meant to do. It does not ask what you almost did. It doesn't ask what you planned, posted, imagined, or intended. It asks one question. What did you do? Did you rise? Did you move? Did you return? Did you keep the promise after the feeling passed? Did you supply the required inputs? Now, wouldn't it be wonderful if none of this were true? Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't it be marvelous if you didn't have to get out of bed? If the covers could become your kingdom, and if the pillow could become your throne? If the day could show up with all its little obligations, all its little invoices, all its little demands on your soul, and then politely excuse itself? Wouldn't that be nice? To never rise, to never answer, to never become, just remain, warm, hidden, unrequired. And wouldn't it be wonderful if appetite had no memory? If you could eat what you wanted, drink what you wanted, scroll as long as you wanted, chase whatever called your name, and nothing ever came back to collect payment. No heaviness in the body, no fog in the mind, no shame in the morning. No account to settle with the mirror. Wouldn't that be convenient, if consequence was just some old superstition? Some dusty old idea for serious men with bad lighting and stiff collars. If the body was only a toy. If the soul could be neglected without noticing. If becoming required nothing from us. If discipline could be delivered like a package. If the soul could be financed in low monthly payments. That would be something, wouldn't it? If the screen could glow forever. If the music could swell forever. If the appetite could keep feeding, and somehow, in all that motion, you never had to ask the terrible question, what am I becoming? Because that is the question, not what do I want? The modern man knows what he wants. He wants everything. He wants pleasure without price, strength without strain, intimacy without honesty. He wants transformation without surrender. He wants to remain exactly as he is and still somehow become something greater. And wouldn't that be wonderful? If the mountain came down to meet the lazy man. If the forge warmed itself around cold steel. If courage could be downloaded. But unfortunately, or maybe perhaps mercifully, that is not the arrangement. The body still requires its inputs. The mind still requires direction. The soul still requires order, and the life a man claims to want still requires a man capable of supplying them. Reality does not get offended when he refuses. It doesn't yell. It doesn't chase him down. It simply records the absence, the skipped input, the neglected duty. The appetite obeyed, the standard postponed, and then, in time, it hands him the result. The standard doesn't resent the man who sleeps too much. It simply allows him to become the kind of man who sleeps too much. The body doesn't resent the man who refuses to move. It simply becomes the body of a man who refuses to move. And the mind does not resent the man who feeds it noise. It simply becomes the mind of a man who consumes noise. The universe is not cruel, but it is exact. It doesn't punish the man who feeds every appetite. It simply allows the appetite to grow teeth. It doesn't condemn the man who runs from silence. He simply permits the silence to become heavier each time he runs. That is the mercy and terror of existence. We are permitted to become what we repeatedly obey, and a man is always becoming something. Always. Even when he thinks he is doing nothing. Even when he says he is only resting. Even when he insists he is only passing the time, time does not pass without leaving fingerprints. So a man says, I am free. But what if he cannot stop wanting? What if he cannot command his attention? What if he cannot tell his appetite no? What if he can't sit in a quiet room without reaching for noise? What then? Is that freedom? Or is that just a decorated cage? A cage with music, a cage with snacks, a cage with little windows into everyone else's cages, and perhaps the bars are invisible because they are made of permission. Permission to collapse, permission to excuse, permission to remain unfinished, permission to be less than the thing you know privately, painfully, you were supposed to become. Now, this is not condemnation. It is observation. An honest observation is often the beginning of freedom, because a man cannot govern what he refuses to see. He cannot command what he will not name, and he cannot outgrow a pattern he keeps defending as his personality. That's the little trap. The weaker part of a man rarely arrives as a villain. It arrives as a negotiator. It says, only today. You have been through enough. No one will know. This is not who you are. And that last one is dangerous because the thing you repeat is exactly what you are becoming. Not forever, not beyond repair, but for now. For this season, for this body, this mind, for this life, you keep voting into existence. And that brings us to the divided self. The self he calls me is not one thing. It is a crowd. There is the man who wants to rise and the man who wants 5 more minutes. There is the man who wants to be strong and the man who wants comfort to explain itself as wisdom. There is the man who wants to be honest and the man who wants to be understood without being exposed. The loudest voice is not always the truest one. The most wounded voice is not always the wisest one. The most urgent voice is not always the one qualified to lead. The tired man should be heard, but he should not govern. The hungry man should be acknowledged, but he should not govern. The angry man may have information, but he should not govern. The wounded boy may deserve compassion, but he cannot be permitted to drive the whole machine, because if he does, he will drive it toward whatever feels safe, familiar, and immediate, not toward what is true, not toward what is durable, not toward what will make a man whole. This is why discipline is so often misunderstood. Discipline is not hatred of the self. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is not some joyless religion for men who forgot how to laugh. Discipline is the art of deciding which part of you is qualified to lead, and that is all. It is not a whip, it is a throne. It is not the denial of life, it is the ordering of life. It is the moment the man inside the man stands up and says, no, not that one. He is loud, but he is not fit to rule. And that is where freedom begins. Not in doing whatever impulse demands. Not in calling every appetite authentic. Not in mistaking permission for liberty. Freedom begins when the man can hear the appetite, understand the appetite, and still decline the appetite. And then the work begins. Not the glamorous work, not the cinematic work, not the work people applaud, the plain work, the repeated work, the almost invisible work, getting out of bed, washing the bowl, lifting the weight, telling the truth, apologizing, restraining yourself, returning, beginning again. There is something cosmic about this, though we miss it because it looks ordinary. A star burns by law. A river cuts stone by persistence. A tree does not negotiate with winter. The body adapts to what is demanded of it. The mind is shaped by what it attends to, and the soul is organized around what it worships. And whether a man admits it or not, he is always worshiping something. Comfort, image, appetite, escape, or the standard. Something is always receiving the best of him. Something is always being fed. Something is always being obeyed. So the question is not whether you will serve. The question is, what will be worthy of your service? Because you can serve appetite, and appetite will grow. You can serve fear, and fear will build walls. You can serve noise, and noise will make silence unbearable. Or you can serve the standard. And yes, the standard is merciless in the beginning. It doesn't flatter you. It doesn't applaud your intention. It asks simply, what did you do? But if a man stays with it, if he discovers that the standard is not his enemy, it may be the first honest friend he has ever had. Because the standard does not lie to him. It tells him where he is, and if he can bear that, it shows him where to place his foot next. So rise, not dramatically, not perfectly, not for applause. Rise because the day has arrived with its hand extended. Rise because the weaker government has had enough terms in office. Rise because your appetites have made their argument and you have heard them, and they are not qualified to rule. Rise because the standard remains. Rise because the required inputs are still required, and because the man you are becoming is built, quietly and repeatedly, by the man who gets up.